Welcome to Destination Raesir, a Six Worlds adventure. Chapter 1, Departure. Captain's Log, 15 July 2419. Theo J. Galen commanding. This has been a full day, performing all the final checklists, welcoming crew members aboard, final run tests with engineering, and a general walkthrough of the Intrepid. She is indeed a fine ship, and while certainly not as large or plush as the interplanetary star cruisers I have commanded in the past, she feels more than equal to the mission that lay ahead of her. Tomorrow will mark 450 years since Neil Armstrong first set foot on Terra Luna, or what was simply called the Moon, in 1969. Tomorrow also marks 40 years since the first manned flight reached outside our solar system for better long-range observation of our ultimate destination, the Alpha Centauri star system. The Intrepid was designed and built to maintain near light speed, which will enable us to reach Alpha Centauri A, or Raesir, and her fourth planet, Theia, in just under 5 years. The testing for hypersleep was one of the toughest I've ever had to endure, and it was also the hurdle by which many who were tapped for this mission were screened out. I suppose it's good to know all your crew could not be in better physical condition. The decision to rotate half the crew in and out of hypersleep every year was controversial, but the medical team provided data that it was better for our long-term health. On a personal note, I prefer to be awake at intervals for the journey, as part of me was never comfortable with the idea of 5 years of fully automated flight. Nor does the hypersleep chamber look particularly inviting. In truth, it reminds me more of an elaborate torpedo casing with a nice viewport. Having a contingent of 20 military-trained security personnel aboard feels like overkill for a crew and team of scientists numbering almost 100 in total. But Six Worlds HQ is more concerned with what we may face on the surface of Theia. Preliminary data suggests the planet may already support life, so the variables could be high. All things considered, I'm looking forward to my bunk tonight. As captain's quarters go, these are above average. Not the largest by any means, but the bed is almost comfortable, and that counts for a lot. End of log. Most star cruisers were slightly smaller than ocean liners found on Earth, but possessed a sleeker profile similar to a submarine. Modules on the stern section housed the engines, and since they were built and operated in space, provisions for takeoff or landing were unnecessary. Intrepid carried 2 dropships to handle cargo and passenger transfer duties. The years of terraforming that transformed the Moon into Terra Luna, then Venus, Mars, and finally Ganymede and Callisto, created what was now commonly called the Six Worlds. With colonization growing on Ganymede and Callisto, 2 other Jovian moons, Io and Europa, had various mining operations underway as a forerunner to terraforming. The first star cruisers were the workhorses that transported people and goods between the planets. They laid the groundwork for what would later become commercial transport routes for goods and passengers. The almost countless trips they made developed an entire generation of pilots, crews, engineers, and captains who would later be the backbone of commercial spaceflight for years to come. As engine technology improved, travel times plunged, and trips that originally took months shrank to days. From Earth, smaller star cruisers could make the trek to Terra Luna or Venus in hours. Depending on orbit position, the larger ships could reach Mars or the Jovian moons in a few days. On the morning of the launch, Captain Galen made his way up to the dorsal observation deck. On a commercial star cruiser, this space would be a lounge for passengers to relax and enjoy the view. On Intrepid, it was a hub of control consoles for scanners, cameras, sensors, and long-range telescope imaging, essentially the eyes of the ship. The view wasn't bad either, but someone else was already taking in the sights. Looking away from Terra Luna and framed by the spars of the docking structure, Earth shone against the blackness of space. Never gets old, does it, Danny? Galen asked casually as he joined his first officer in admiring the planet. It's strange how we take the sight of her for granted, she replied wistfully. But it's going to be a long, long time before we see her again. Commander Daniel Osaka was a veteran officer of star cruisers with almost 10 years' experience. Born and raised on Akai, Tokyo, on Mars, her parents took her on several vacations to Earth, where she got to see much of Japan, including the legendary city of Tokyo, the namesake of her home. It was an experience she never tired of, as it always seemed to be changing and evolving with every visit. A great deal of her motivation to make space travel her career was to have the chance to see more of the six worlds. While her stature was small, her dedication to martial arts kept her in top shape, and the gaze of her deep green eyes could be piercing. Her short, dark hair was forever neatly styled, but simple to manage, and it fit her no-nonsense attitude. Her sharp-edged command style was what drew Galen to choose her as the person to command in his stead. He relished the time to speak with her now, since they would be on opposite sleep rotation until they reached Thea. I agree completely, Galen responded, also allowing a bit of emotion to creep into his voice. I recall you telling me about your trips to Earth. You were lucky. My parents were perfectly happy to stay in Sinai on Mars, which is why I signed up for Six World Patrol as soon as I turned 18. The two shared a laugh, knowing how much they both wanted to get to the stars when they started out. Galen went on, recalling his youth. I still remember the first time I saw the pyramids of Giza. I was literally speechless. Kind of like right now? Danny joked playfully. Yes, Galen chuckled as he agreed. Only worse. I just stood there with my jaw hanging open. I couldn't even make myself say wow. Danny grinned as she continued to needle her captain. I have a hard time imagining you speechless. I've never known you to be at a loss for words. I've been educated and cultured since then, he replied with dry wit. But that was a pivotal moment. What got you out of Six Worlds Patrol? Danny asked, changing her tone to genuine curiosity. I never asked before, and come to think of it, I've never heard you say much on the subject. Your record shows you were a decorated combat veteran. Galen answered slowly, turning very solemn. And that's why. I was decorated for doing what I was trained to do, and I did it with great skill and efficiency. I was trained in the cockpit of jump jets, on the ground, and with my own hands. Danny asked cautiously, clearly seeing the look on her captain's face. You were decorated for kills. They said it was for saving lives, for rescue of civilians. Galen looked down at his hands, his voice heavy with regret. But that was achieved by eliminating the enemy. Never again. Danny took his forearm in her hands and squeezed gently as she tried to console him. I understand. I know 10 different ways to kill someone without a weapon of any kind. I've never had to do it, thankfully. Count yourself fortunate, Galen answered kindly as he slipped his arm free. I hope you never do. Anyway, that's why I became a commercial flight officer. No combat. He let a smile creep onto his face as he pushed his humor back to the surface. You know, the occasional irate passenger, but no combat. Thank you, sir, Danny said with a small lump in her throat. Thank you for trusting me with that information. I won't forget. Galen turned to face his officer and stood tall. Commander Osaka, you have my complete trust, and I am honored to have you on this mission. Aye, sir, she said proudly, snapping a salute. Report to the bridge, Commander, the captain ordered. I'm going to make one last stop in engineering to see Lieutenant Commander Melosi. Aye, sir, Danny replied with a grin. Tell Fetu I'm coming for him. Negative, Commander, Galen answered with a sly smile. You can call him Fetu, and any challenges are between the two of you in the gym. Leave me out of it. Just as the captain was heading toward the door, a robot dressed in a gray flight suit walked in. His face was an animation screen with eyes and mouth that appeared against the black background. His voice was articulate but still clearly synthetic. The robot stood straight and gave a salute. Good morning, Captain, it said in an upbeat tone. I was told I could find you here. Galen noted the name Tony on the left chest of the flight suit and asked, puzzled, Good morning. Did you take someone's flight suit? State your mission. I am Iron Unit 2778, the robot responded immediately. I am not programmed to steal property from a crew member or passenger. My mission is to serve this ship and crew for the duration of the journey. Galen still looked confused. Okay, so who is Tony? And what is an Iron Unit? Osaka chimed in happily. Integrated Robotic Omnimatrix New Droid, sir. There should be 2 aboard. New Droid? Galen asked aside in an irritated tone. It's the name of the manufacturer, sir, Osaka replied, holding in a chuckle. Corny, I admit. I wasn't informed, the captain grumbled. Why don't we have the usual virtual assistants? I am Tony, the robot added. Commander Osaka is correct regarding my origin. I am the 2-meter model, and the decision was made to use robots for the mission since virtual assistants require a constant data stream to operate. In the event of a catastrophic power failure, James and I will still be able to function. I can also operate in extreme conditions and without atmosphere. Holographic virtuals are unable to meet those criteria. That sounds quite impressive, Tony, Galen replied with reservation. So what positions are you programmed to man, if needed? All of them, sir, Tony reported instantly. Even the ship's surgeon? The captain asked with cagey curiosity. Tony didn't hesitate. Affirmative, sir. Galen looked aside to Osaka and mumbled, Nowhere near me. Understand? Nowhere. Aye, sir, Danny chuckled through her reply, completely amused at her captain's reaction. I do have one more question, the captain said as he paused for a beat and then pointed at Tony. Why the flight suit? It has pockets, sir, Tony answered straight away, gave a salute, and asked for orders. Where do you wish for me to begin, Captain? I'm sorry, but... Galen stammered a second, still getting his head around this. Working with virtuals was like interacting with any other human, since they were scanned from living models. Their reactions and responses were not machine-like at all. You said you were the 2-meter model? What does that make? James, did you say? Affirmative, Captain, Tony said as he gestured to his height. Series 7-8 are 2-meter tall models. James is a Series 5-8, which is a 1.7 meter in height. This allows him easier access to smaller places and may not fit. Do you have any other questions for me, sir? I am completely blank, Galen said offhand, still deciding what lay ahead with this machine. He had some past experience with older model robots during his time with Six Worlds Patrol, and while they were ideal for some tasks, he found them sadly lacking in others. "Why don't you come with me to the bridge, Tony?" Danny said cheerfully. "We'll let the captain finish his launch prep." Drawing a sigh of relief, the captain nodded to his first officer in thanks and headed for engineering. Down elevators and stairs in between walking decks to reach the lower engine rooms, Galen let his mind wander as he went. There was a charming quality to Commander Osaka, and he felt a strong chemistry between them, but every fiber of his being resisted the notion. All his years commanding star cruisers, there had only been one person who claimed his heart. He would say her name to himself in his thoughts, and often wondered what life would have been like with her, but he made the concentrated effort to not say her name aloud. He kept no images or tokens of her, save those in his memory. There had always been his ships and his crews, and he loved them like family, but the captain's quarters remained a solitary place. In truth, it was one of the biggest reasons he took this command, hoping its broad purpose would fill the empty need in his life that no relationship ever had before. Crew members he passed in the walkways all nodded, saluted, or simply said, "Captain," as they passed. And that was how he preferred things to run. Formalities had their time and place, but a smooth-running ship was better for everyone. Having the kind of approachable atmosphere was something Galen always tried to foster. That way, no one felt they had to hide who they were just because of his presence in the room. Stepping into the lower engineering level was a shining example, as Lieutenant Commander Fetu Malosi hardly flinched when the pressure door swung open. Malosi hailed from Samoa on Earth, and he was a beast of a man. Barely what you might consider medium height, Galen often wondered if there were bulkhead passages where Malosi would have to squeeze to get through. He might be half as broad as he was tall, but the proportions of his shoulders and chest compared to his waist were almost cartoon superhero dimension. His engineer coveralls were missing all but a couple of inches of the sleeves, exposing his tattooed skin from wrist to neck. Malosi carried a history of his family line painted on his body, as well as his own accomplishments. While the missing sleeves were technically against regulation, it was something the captain would defend to the last. The Samoan officer earned his respect long ago as a comrade in Six Worlds Patrol, and being the chief engineer meant you trusted him with the lives of everyone aboard. "Are you happy with her?" Galen asked in jest, fully expecting a salty response. "We're getting to know each other, yeah?" Malosi grunted with a grin. "But there's always room for improvement." Galen laughed as he came closer to the reactor console where Malosi leaned casually. "Have you ever been happy with a ship?" "My first." Malosi smiled broadly as he replied. "But mostly, I was too young and foolish to know better." "Seriously?" Galen prodded for more solid information. "Do you think she'll be reliable? Because it kind of needs to be." "She's got potential," Malosi said as he looked around, beaming with approval. "We'll have to see if she'd do me right or wrong, yeah?" "I'm hoping for right," Galen answered quickly as he joined his crewmen in admiring the engine room. "Everything always looks so pristine when it's new." Malosi folded his arms and tilted his head, cutting a wry glance at his captain. "Pretty, shining, but not loved." "How long does that take?" Galen asked with a laugh. Having these chats with Fetu never failed to be entertaining. When he stopped joking, you knew it meant real trouble. "We launch with these two." Malosi pointed at the ceiling, indicating the dorsal engines. "Past Jupiter, then we warm up the babies." He gestured to each side, indicating the ventral units. "When we get to the black, then we'll see what she's got. If she goes like the test, then we're in love." "That soon?" Galen asked with surprise, thinking more about the destination. "I was thinking it would be Alpha Centauri." "No, that's not love." Fatu responded confidently as he raised a finger. Thea means trust. Then he joined his hands together tightly. Then we'll take on anything. I read in my briefing we're launching with some new tech, Galen asked, knowing Melosi would be the very best source of information. Hypercoms? The memo was about as clear as mud. The husky Samoan laughed as he explained. It's something they experimented with on the last probe to Alpha Centauri. There's a listening station in orbit around Titan, which is basically an elaborate comms satellite. But that was the target frequency to relay information back to Earth. The hypercom emitter on the probe sent a data bundle via faster-than-light burst, cutting transmission time by roughly 90%. And we're set up for that? Is it operational? Galen prodded, again, knowing his engineer was up to speed. The probe only transmitted from 1 light year out, Melosi continued, rubbing his chin as if he were intrigued. We'll be dropping transmitter relays, satellite buoys, you might say, at 1 light year intervals. We'll be sending test data with each new buoy, with the goal being to send back information on Thea in months instead of years. The buoys have onboard microreactors, so they power themselves for station keeping and an impressive century-long lifespan. The captain seemed dubious in his reply. That sounds like a quantum leap in communication tech, but it doesn't really do us much good when we get out there, does it? I mean, it's still a 5-month interval. That's true, Melosi agreed, but added his own angle. But if Six Worlds orders us to abort before we get there, I'm sure they'll take that into account. Plus, they want regular status updates on the ship's performance and efficiency. It's still a big experiment to test signal degradation after multiple relay boosts. Personally, I think it's going to fly. The captain gave his engineer a firm pat on the shoulder as he spoke sincerely. You know, if you didn't make the cut for this mission, I would have stepped down. You're the only one I want down here. Melosi grinned as he replied, I go where you go. No one else. Thanks, Fet. That means a lot, Galen said gratefully as he clasped hands. But the squeeze got very tight for a moment as Melosi's arm bulged. No one else calls me that. Fatu chuckled as he watched Galen's eyes swell from the grip. He released the hand and turned for the engine room door. The captain massaged his hand for a few seconds before stepping into the lift that would carry him to the upper engine levels. He thought once about telling Osaka to call Melosi Fet at their next sparring session, but that felt like a betrayal of trust. That would be Melosi's call. But in the meantime, Galen counted himself fortunate to have these people with him for the next decade. Launch time was fast approaching, and whatever awaited them on Thea, he would face it surrounded by a crew he could count on. In the gymnasium, Major Dak Cheveo gathered his security team for a final briefing before launch. Cheveo was descended from the North American Lakota, where the Black Hills were their home. An honors graduate of Crazy Horse University, he'd spent his life after college in the Six Worlds Marines, where he saw action during the Ganymede Revolt. Once his military tour was complete, he moved into security and law enforcement. While he thought that career would take him away from combat scenarios, it seemed his background managed to thrust him into every manner of civil unrest across the Six Worlds. When the Alpha Centauri mission was posted for volunteers, he felt it could be a healthy, long-term break. Tall and athletically fit, Cheveo cut an impressive figure, while his native dark hair, eyes, and skin gave him a male model handsome look. Standing before his team, he was flanked by his second-in-command to his right, Lieutenant Yuri Baran, a medium-height, sinewy man of Slavic descent from the Taurus Mountains on Terra Luna. Not unlike the wintry climate of his ancestors from the Baltic Sea region on Earth. His blond hair and blue eyes gave him a boyish look, but Yuri was cut from rock-hard ice, inside and out. To Cheveo's left stood his master sergeant, Dina Okoye, who was an imposing woman, almost equal to her commander in height. Her background was a mix of Maori and Australian Aboriginal culture, as her black hair and skin color revealed. Her light brown eyes gave her a piercing stare, and her athletic background of rugby and lacrosse spoke of her toughness. She had been a drill instructor for the past 4 years, and this mission appealed to her as an important change of pace. "Stand easy," Cheveo said firmly as he began to address his whole team for what he knew would be the last time until arriving at Alpha Centauri. He began to pace back and forth in front of the team. "I'd like to begin by saying how much I admire and respect each of you for volunteering for this mission. That was an act of commitment, and it should be recognized accordingly. The training to make the cut for this program was not easy, and we all know good people who sadly failed, but we owe it to those we leave behind to do our best. None of us know what awaits us on Theia, but we must be prepared to secure the safety of this crew and each other at all costs." He stopped between his secondaries once again and continued. "During the voyage, we will be awakened in rotation, as you know. Lieutenant Baran and Master Sergeant Okoye will be overseeing training during your waking hours. Hypersleep has its benefits for a mission such as this, but it also has its downsides. We tend to lose muscle mass, and our recovery is decreased. I cannot stress enough how important it is to maintain your fitness routines during the off-sleep periods. We need to be in top trim when we reach Theia, because the unknowns of any situation may demand it. The other crucial factor is that you fully hydrate before entering the sleep chambers. That will be essential for your bodily functions and to make the waking process easier to transition. Are there any questions?" A recruit in the back spoke up. "Do we have any idea at all what we might find on Theia, sir?" Cheveo paused. "I honestly don't know what that could be." Lieutenant Baran chimed in. "Sir, if I may?" "Yes, Lieutenant," Cheveo responded confidently. "What do you have?" Baran made sure his voice carried to the entire group. "While we don't know precisely what is on Theia, the science team have uploaded all of their findings so far to the ship's databanks. You can access them in your quarters. They also include studies and theories by the specialists on the team as to what those findings could result. Those are not facts by any means, but it is a wealth of information to go on. I would suggest we all make ourselves familiar with their work. More information is always better than blind guessing." "Absolutely, Lieutenant Baran. Well done," the Major replied as he looked over his group. "We're going to be together for at least a decade. This could be a mission that changes your life, and it certainly will be an experience none of us will forget. I'm honored to be with you. If you need anything, do not, I repeat, do not hesitate to ask your commanding officer. We are here to help each other through this. Any other questions?" Sergeant Okoye spoke up. "I've got something to add, sir." "Go ahead, Sergeant," Cheveo said gladly, happy to see his leader setting a strong example. Okoye cleared her throat and looked around the room. "Many of you knew other members of this unit before you joined this mission. Camaraderie is a good thing for team cohesion and is something we encourage. But if you care about your fellow members, you are more likely to go the extra mile for them. Now, you can take this piece of advice for what you deem it's worth. The scientific study of hypersleep shows we still have a level of awareness regarding our surroundings despite our suspended state. What I'm saying is if you have a mate who is on sleep cycle when the other is not, go to their sleep chamber and talk to them. Read to them. Tell them what's on your mind. While it may be no more than a dream state, you would be surprised at how much they may retain. If you disregard this advice, there is no consequence but your own. As awkward as it may sound, I encourage you to try. You may find it therapeutic for yourselves as well as your comrades. This technique of sleep osmosis has originally developed to help those who suffer from PTSD, and it has been effective in many cases. She swept the room with her eyes, but saw no more hands up or eager faces begging a question. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Sergeant, Cheveo added instantly and with gratitude. I've never heard of that before, but I completely agree. In fact, while I'm in hypersleep rotation, I'd like a daily status report. I look forward to hearing from you, for lack of a better term. As ordered, sir, Okoye replied with a slight laugh, and the entire team joined in the humor of the moment. But for many, silent as they may be, the thought of someone visiting them during sleep rotation was comforting. If no one else has anything, I'll remind you the ship is launching in a couple of hours, so if you wish to send any last live comms to anyone, now's the time. You'll still be able to send update messages until we're out of range. You're dismissed. As the group broke up, Sergeant Okoye approached her commander and spoke in a private tone. I'd like to say that it was an impressive briefing, sir, and thank you for your vote of confidence. Don't mention it, Dina, Cheveo said casually, also keeping his voice down as others moved past. I meant it when I said I hadn't heard of the sleep therapy before. That was on point. Well done. There is one other item, Okoye continued cautiously. I wasn't sure if you'd want it brought to your attention since it's of a personal nature. That's no problem, Cheveo replied with concern, hoping something wasn't wrong that would make him lose his sergeant at the last minute. What's wrong, Dina? What do you need? Not me, sir, Okoye said hesitantly. I meant a personal matter for you, sir. Me? Cheveo answered with blank curiosity. What might that be? I was reviewing the ship's manifest and roster. Dina proceeded slowly, trying to ease in, unsure of what her commander's response might be. I noted the science team members, and one name stood out, Dr. Katori Lone Tree. I know you've mentioned her often. In fact, she's the only name I've ever heard you mention, and usually in a fond way, but you always made it sound like she broke your heart. Anyway, I thought you should know. Okoye held her breath at the silence between them as she watched the look of recognition and reflection sweep over Cheveo's face. He looked at the floor and rubbed his chin as if great concern was bearing down on him. I'm sorry if I overstepped, sir, she apologized deeply. I wasn't. It's no problem, Dina, Cheveo quickly reassured her. He caught her eyes and added with confidence. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it, honestly. I do. Now, go ahead and take care of your pre-launch details. Aye, sir, Dina responded as she stood at attention. On my way, sir. As she turned to walk away, her commander called out, making her take pause. Sergeant, thank you for your attention to detail. Well done. Dina nodded with a slight smile and headed out of the gym. The major stood silent as the room emptied, and once he was alone, he moved to a nearby bench to take a seat. Staring down at his boots, his mind was taken back to an overnight campfire in the Badlands on Earth. The expansive grasslands east of the Black Hills was where he grew up, but to the north, the land elevated into a high desert plateau. It was a place where many ancient frontiersmen came to their end, trapped by wild animals or lost to harsh conditions, unable to find a way out. But for Dak Cheveo and Katori Lone Tree, it was a place of heartfelt memories. They met at Crazy Horse University in South Dakota on Earth, where the campus sprawled out in the shadow of the 200-meter-tall mountain carving of the legendary native warrior. Everyone who attended Crazy Horse was forever awestruck by the size of the monument and it was a source of inspiration and pride to all. The courtyard of the campus was a favorite gathering place, where many would come to capture images of the sun rising behind the mountain, and again at sunset when the stone would be lit in the fading light. The glow at sunset was so haunting, you almost expected the horse to burst from the mountain and the war chief to thunder away into the darkness. Katori Lone Tree was of Navajo descent, and Dak thought she was gloriously beautiful from the first time he laid eyes on her. The rich black hair against her skin framed her large brown eyes, and her smile was radiant, and on the rare occasions she shared it with anyone. She seemed a bit of an outsider since she shunned most of the typical college youth behavior. No parties, no drunken lapses of judgment, or all-night carousing. Instead, she'd take a jump jet and fly off to the east. As it turned out, she was going to study history, geology, and archaeology. Her repeated trips were to the Badlands, a massive series of box canyons and slots where the slope had eroded into straighted rock formations. It was as if the ocean had carved out hundreds of fjords and then drained away. There she would spend hours or sometimes days doing archaeological research. Dak had been raised to learn the old ways of his people, and his father spent many hours teaching his son to track, hunt, and how to survive. Those skills proved useful more than once in his adult life, and conveniently when he joined Kat in the Badlands. The slowly dying campfire and the sight of the Milky Way painted across the night sky were things they shared and relished. "Major Dak Chiveo to the hangar deck," the voice boomed over the comm system. "Major Chiveo, report to the captain on the hangar deck, please." Standing in the middle of the hangar deck, Captain Galen stood with his arms folded as he looked over the two standard dropships assigned to the Intrepid. The dropships were do-it-all workhorses, capable of space or atmosphere flight. They had heavy payload capacity and could be equipped for multiple mission roles. They looked like bulky cargo planes with stubby wings and tail fins, which made them appear all the more pedestrian against what they were docked next to. The CA-67 Comanche Assault was the latest generation multi-role combat support craft, straight from the Six Worlds Marines. This was the replacement for the WD-5 he knew so well from his various tours of duty. Marines referred to the WD-5 as Whiskey Delta 5, or more often, what the fuck. It was a tough ship that was hard to bring down and packed a punch. You hated it because it was loud and uncomfortable, but you loved it when it landed in a hot zone to get you the hell out, and it never failed that mission. The furrow across Galen's brow made for a look of frustration as the Comanche brought back a raft of unwelcome memories. The hours and days spent inside the Spartan cargo area, the basic seats made for utility instead of comfort, the gear and weapons stowed in every available spot, and the cockpit loaded with enough tech gear to rival just about anything that flew. Galen knew if he set foot inside this thing, it would be more of the same, and that was a chapter of his life he wasn't interested in reliving. The appearance from the exterior was bad enough. While the fuselage still retained the semi-box-like shape fit for cargo, the upper and lower wings sprouted off in an X pattern. The lower wings supported the retractable landing skids, along with weapons pods, while the upper carried a battery of 3 pulse lasers on each wing. The nose had a geometric arrow shape, and the entire ship looked like it just wanted to pick a fight. The only thing missing was a glaring set of teeth. The captain's voice was gruff as Chiveo approached. "Major Chiveo, welcome aboard." "Thank you, sir," the major answered with a tinge of curiosity. The captain's gaze never left the dropships as he went on in a salty tone. "Major, I'd like you to take a look around. One of these things is not like the other. Would you care to take a guess?" "The Comanche?" Cheveo said, knowing this would be the point of contention. He knew Captain Galen was former military and was aware he didn't care for violent solutions to problems. Captain Galen's tone and stare was unchanged, and not the slightest bit brighter. "Would you care to offer an explanation, Major, as to why there is a Comanche assault ship in my hangar bay? I know this is not standard issue, and it was not on my flight manifest." "Excuse me, Captain," Cheveo replied confidently. "A multi-role support ship is standard issue for a security team of this size, especially when entering an unknown location." "We know where we are going, Major," Galen said with a sigh of frustration. "But we have no idea what is there or what we may encounter," Cheveo fired back firmly. "The unknown can always be perilous, and extraction of a landing team in danger often requires the need to suppress a threat." "This is not a military operation," Galen barked with disapproval. "Don't you think we're smart enough to assess danger before we step into it?" "I do, sir," Cheveo held firm. "But you deal with known factors, and you take possibilities into account. But I'm here for the things you don't foresee. Forgive my being blunt, sir, but I'm here for the shitstorm you didn't see hiding, in which case the Comanche will become a welcome sight." "I want that ship locked down and guarded around the clock," Galen ordered sternly. "Are we clear?" "Crystal, sir," Cheveo acknowledged with equal resolve. Galen immediately continued, bearing down hard. "I'm not having some off-the-rocker case change their mind 2 years in and think they'll shoot their way out and go home, forgetting the fact that they wouldn't have enough fuel or resources to make it back." "As ordered, sir," Cheveo added in rebuttal. "I accept your concerns, and they will be addressed. You have my word, Captain." Galen snapped a salute and turned sharply away, striding off the hangar deck with haste. It was obvious something struck a nerve, and Cheveo had no idea what that could be. To be honest, he never considered such an act of lunacy might take place, but then he'd never been on a decade-long mission either. At this point, no one had, but it was a viable concern, and he would follow the order to the letter. The docking frame where the Intrepid was moored was in locked orbit with Terra Luna, meaning it always faced Earth. But today's launch had been timed for when the body of the Earth began to eclipse the sun, and what would be called the new moon on the surface was beginning. This time was chosen purely for photographic aesthetic, providing a dark backdrop for the glow of the Intrepid engines as she moved away. On the front of the docking frame was a crew support module, which housed essentials for the dock workers: a medical bay, locker rooms and showers, rest quarters, and a kitchen with a large cafeteria for meals and downtime. The cafeteria had a row of display windows around 2 walls, giving an expansive view of the vessel in dock and of its exit path. Today this space was filled with staff, 6 world's leaders and dignitaries, and of course, the press, all here for the launch of this truly historic mission. In truth, the launch itself was undramatic. The moorings would be set free, docking arms retracted, and a short burst from the thrusters to get the ship gently moving until they were clear. Then, in an action that was purely for show, Intrepid would fire all her engines for a short burn to power away from Terra Luna's gravity field. 2 of the engines at partial thrust would be sufficient, but the full burn made for a glorious photo op, and the press and dignitaries loved a good show. In his full dress uniform, with his first officer by his side, Captain Galen gave the order to launch, and held a salute toward the crew module for any press with a good zoom image. Commander Osaka saluted as well as she smiled and joked with her captain. "You really hate every moment of this, don't you?" Galen held his composure as he dryly answered, "I hate every inch of this uniform. Whoever designed this thing threw comfort to the stars." Doing her best to keep from laughing, Osaka was grateful to notice the ship beginning to move. Just when she thought she'd get through this, the observation deck door opened and in strolled Chief Medical Officer Dr. Rachel Raines. "Why, Doctor," Galen said calmly, "how good of you to join us. I thought you elected to pass on ceremony." Raines took her spot on the opposite side of the captain, snapped her salute to the crowd, and could barely contain the snicker in her voice. "Are you shitting me? You, in full dress. I wouldn't miss this for the rings of Saturn." "I can drop you there, if you like," Galen said directly, never flinching. "I do love it when you talk dirty," Raines countered through her smile. "A decade of entertainment. Hot damn." "You'll sleep half of it." Galen dropped his hand as the ship moved clear of the dock, looking at the doctor with a sly gaze. "Try not to get worked up." "Very true, sir," Raines agreed as she took a seat next to the captain, bracing for the show burn. "But I'll be sure to be on the same sleep cycle as you. I wouldn't want you to miss me." Commander Osaka remained silent, but she could not have been more amused listening to the two trading barbs. She knew they had a history since Raines had treated Galen for wounds and surgery. They seemed to have a close relationship, but if they were friends was anyone's guess. The voice of Chief Helmsman Vega Swoop Shaheen came over the comm. "All hands, departure burn in 10 seconds. Swoop gave the countdown as they all held fast, and Intrepid gave the viewers the show they had been looking forward to. The burn lasted 30 seconds, and everyone knew they were on the way. The thought of what lay between them and Alpha Centauri crossed everyone's mind, especially once they left the solar system. Whatever that may be, it would be the first time humans saw it with the naked eye.